Good morning, everyone. It's 11 sharp. Thank you very much for joining us today for another exciting Anchor Travel webinar. We're very happy and very proud to see the attendance growing each and every session. Thank you. Every person here coming means a lot to us. Today marks a closure to the pandemic focus series, Yay, and represents a new chapter in our world. While rebuilding our industry, sustainability takes the spotlight, everyone's attention. The focus on protecting our planet is a news, and it's exciting to see the travel world taking action. We all do our part as individuals. I, for example, drive a Nissan Leaf, for example, a fully electric vehicle. Very practical for urban commute, groceries, kids' schedule, which are the vast majority of our outings anyways. We still try the crazy adventure of a Christmas for those that had a chance to have a conversation in between. And we drove 700 kilometers from Montreal to Blue Mountains in that car. It took us 12 hours. The heat and the weight of 4 people and the 1 week amount of luggage forced us to stop 3 times in order to recharge the battery. We pulled it off. I cannot say it's something I'm looking forward to do it again. Anyway, so my car, no carbon emission, no noise, and very environmentally friendly, according to the mass knowledge about what is it like to be environmentally friendly. Individuals seems ready to make greener choices, but it's hard to see past our individual choices and look at the end-to-end design of the supply chain. What, for example, is the environmental impact of actually producing a car like mine? How much distance have all the parts traveled to be assembled, likely in combustion vehicles? Were the plants and manufacturers forging the parts and putting them together certified LED? I doubt it. How is the electricity needed for my car to drive produced, stock, distributed? What will happen to my battery once it's old and worn out? All these questions should definitely have an impact on the choices we make, but as the final buyer, we want always to feel good and decide only on using one variable. We are facing a bigger challenge than we think. Sustainable choices do not start and stop at the consumer step. To what degree are we able to understand the holistic part of the goods and services that we consume? How can the corporations act and inform the public about that less sexy part of the process? It may be less exciting to learn about, but it's without any doubt equally as important in our decision making. It's not a mission for marketing departments, but a core function the corporations need to provide clarity on, so we can make a real difference. This is the mission being taken on by the first regional representative for sustainability at Air France-KLM. Marion Chivot joins us today to share her insights on what sustainability means and looks like for a global airline. She brings us expertise in the fields of communication and process design to multicultural corporations. Thank you for being with us today, Marion. Before we jump into it, just the usual quick housekeeping points. The event is recorded and will be made available through the post-event communication. We are together for a discussion between Marion and Fred for the first 30 minutes. Please share your questions in the Q&A section. We will take them at the end of the interview and respond to the best of our ability in French and in English. Then the second half of the event will talk on the integration of the sustainability component into the governance of corporate travel programs. Enough of me. I believe we're ready to go. So Fred, the floor is yours.
So hello everyone, it's always great to host this webinar. I believe this is the 5th one I've hosted. Always coming with different topics, always trying to find new ways to inform our clients as well as prospective clients and anyone who really might be interested in the topics that we provide. So for those that have joined before, welcome. welcome again. For those who are first times to this webinar, you'll find this to be a very informative session that really highlights the industry expert that we have today, who is Marion Chivot, who will go through sort of her role as a sustainability, as head of sustainability at Air France-KLM, as well as sort of what's happening in the industry and what insights we can get out of that, not only for the way we make decisions in our corporate travel programs, but also essentially just how we overall see the industry going and what changes we expect to see in the coming future. So I think I'll go straight into the session, and I'll start with asking the first question to Marion. So Marion, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about Air France-KLM and its sustainability strategy, and as well as what is at stake with your industry when it comes to sustainability?
Thanks, and thanks to the team for the invite for today. So I'm Marion Chivot. I'm head of sustainability for Air France-KLM North America. I'm based in Montreal, and I worked closely with my colleague from Delta because we worked as a joint venture in North America. I joined in April 2020, so right at the beginning of the pandemic. And a figure that I wanted to share with you first is the status quo of our industry, of our sector, while considering the global carbon emission. As you can see on the screen, hopefully you see the screen, the commercial aviation is responsible for 2 to 3% of the global carbon emission. Most of the time, people think that our industry represents 20–25% of the global carbon emission. It's not the case yet. Why I'm saying that is because we do know that based on the air traffic growth pre-pandemic, that ratio is going to increase for sure. And the other industry have already some decarbonization solution, much more than our industry, for example. Although we have solutions, it might take a longer time to really fully help to decarbonize our sector. I want to share also a figure, well, not a figure, a commitment from the global air transport industry with IATA that put an objective of net zero emission by 2050. One of the questions I usually have is, what does it mean, net zero? So I'm just going to explain what is net zero emission. Net zero is the situation where the volume of CO2 emission produced by our activities, so our activity as an airline, is equal of the volume of CO2 capped in the air, in the atmosphere, by artificial or natural carbon sinks. And you will see later in my presentation what could be the solution to reach that. As you can see on that slide, Air France-KLM commitment towards sustainability, it's not something new. Both airlines have, very commitment from a very long time. In 2008, we introduced our first climate action plan to reduce our carbon footprint. So we have a long track history of commitments and achievements towards the fight of climate change. And so on the following slide, you will see that we use, most of the time we use a common language that is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these goals, but basically it's 17 goals that set a standards of a language, if you may, a common language to talk about sustainability and the issues that we can see across the globe. And we use that language on the following slide to make sure we have a strategy aligned with these issues. So we have 4 pillars at Air France-KLM: environment, which is quite the obvious one, employee journey when it comes to our employee and staff towards diversity, equity, inclusion, etc. Social value, how we can give back to the community, but also employability and the economic impact that we have in our hubs and destinations, but also customer trust and ethics, that is a very important pillar for us. And these pillars are aligned with a selection, so we have 8 UN Sustainable Development Goals that you can see on the screen. On the following slide, I want to share what are some recent commitments. There is a lot of text on that slide, but it's to show you that the path to net zero that you can see on the right side of the screen by 2050, we need to reach that goal. We need to have some intermediary, I would say, objective steps. So we put some our own objective of net zero emission by 2050 last summer. And as part of that work, we committed to the Science Based Target Initiative that help us to create additional CO2 reduction targets by 2035 to help us to make sure we're on track to reach the net zero emission by 2050. At Air France-KLM, we have already our own targets set a couple of years ago by 2030, so just before the SBTI objective. One is on the zero ground emission for operation. Another one is how we can reduce the CO2 emission per passenger per kilometer compared to 2005. That's the baseline that we use, but also a reduction on recycled waste compared to 2011. So these are like the recent targets, and I think it's great for you to have an overview that it's ongoing and we didn't stop our efforts during the pandemic. I think, yeah.
Yes, some of the things I'd want to know before you move on is you talked a lot on the high levels of sort of the standardization of the industry, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You've really spoken on the big picture things. Maybe could you share with us some more concrete examples of what is currently done to reach some of these objectives specifically?
Yeah, no, I think it's always good to give the big picture, but people have questions on concrete example. As you can see on that slide, we worked and we completely aligned with our JV partner Delta in North America. We have the same kind of commitments and pathway towards sustainability. One of the first one, and I would say it's our main driver right now, is to continue investing in new generation fuel and carbon efficient aircraft. So for example, for the Airbus fleet, it's the A350 for long haul, the A220 for medium haul. And for Boeing, we have the 787, the Dreamliner. These new aircraft aim to 20 to 25% carbon emission reduction compared to the previous generation. And also you saw during the pandemic, some aircraft parked at airport. We took an opportunity to put in early retirement these aircraft that are the most polluting. This is our main driver right now to reduce our footprint. We continue our efforts, as I mentioned earlier, to offer, responsible carrying option, but also to develop recycling on board in our lounges, to reduce our waste across the whole supply chain and value chain. And we also invest in research and development for sustainable aviation fuel. I will go a bit more into details on what it is, but this innovation will help to reduce up to 75–80%, depending the pathway and the technology behind, to reduce the carbon emission by 75%. In Europe, because we're a European-based airline, we have also the Train Plus Air tickets, and these Train Plus Air tickets are, quite a good driver as well to reduce our impact. We offer programs, and I will show you later, to our customer, B2B and B2C. And also we work, as I mentioned, on diversity, equity, inclusion, but also on social value, making sure we invest in rehabilitation ecosystem initiative, for example. So as you can see on that screen, we took our responsibility a while ago to reduce the fuel consumption per passenger per kilometer through the fleet renewal, through the operational measures. So obviously everything that we can do at airports, the waste management, eco-piloting software on board our aircraft to reduce, our emissions. We invest in the new technology, the sustainable aviation fuel, and we also respect some commitments with CORSIA, the carbon offset and reduction scheme for international aviation. That's something made by ICAO, and also the European emission trading system. So it's important for you, and you will see on the following slide that all these efforts helps to reduce, our CO2 emission. You can see that if we're not doing anything, that would be the red line. It's going to increase for sure. All efforts help to reduce a significant amount of emissions, but we do know that to reach the minus 50% by 2050 targets for the industry, these measures are not enough. We really need to invest more in sustainable aviation fuel, and we really encourage, you will see on the following slide, we really encourage our client to be part of the solution with us. So obviously the CO2 compensation or carbon offset, that is quite common for the couple of years now, but really this investing in the new technology that is sustainable aviation fuel. One of the questions I have from clients the past few months is, oh, but what about the hydrogen aircraft or the electric aircraft? Although they're very good solution, the entry into service dates are not before 2035, and we don't have the luxury to wait until then to act. So that's why we believe that the biofuel, the sustainable aviation fuel, and the fleet renewal are the main driver to really accelerate the reduction to be able to reach the net zero target by 2050.
Okay, wow. Okay, well, clearly there's a lot of initiatives being undertaken by Air France-KLM, and so when you're thinking of demographics, and specifically here on our in our webinar, we have a lot of attendees who are based in Canada, and so I just maybe if you could share a bit more about the state of mind of the travelers and the solutions you offer in Canada.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So basically, we wanted to have a better sense of what clients are thinking, and we ordered a survey with Ipsos early last year in February to really ask clients and non-client what are their state of mind when it comes to sustainability. And as you can see on the screen, we have roughly 60% of Canadian travelers that think they are more conscious about the environment now than before the pandemic. And so you can see on the following slide that we heard you because we know that clients want also to have more information about what we're doing. One of the feedback was saying that, oh, you do things, but maybe we're not aware of it. A few examples that I can share with you today. KLM that operates from various stations in Canada is the first airline to take a responsible catering initiative. Basically, we offer a Beyond Meat option in our world business class from all Canadian stations. This type of option reduce drastically the CO2 imprint, because as you know, red meat have a stronger environmental footprint. The feedback is overall very positive. People again want to have more details about the actual impact, so we are trying to find solution to measure by figures what could be the reduction of offering that type of option to our customer. We have also a pillar on responsible launch. If you've been lucky to travel recently, we have renovated our lounge in Yule in Montreal. And we did the renovation with sustainability specification and criteria. So in the material, recycling, the eco-responsible products. We also donate the former furniture to some charities, local products, etc. So we're really trying to embed and illustrate sustainability in our lounge operations. And then also a new service that we offer to our client for latest flights between Montreal and Paris since the beginning of December. The night service basically offer the customer to take their meal seated at the lounge instead of having it on board, and to be able to enjoy the flight and sleep. And also that service completely participate to our food waste reduction efforts. Feedback is overall positive. People are quite pleased with that service. And yeah, if you're flying in business class, you will, or you have access to the lounge, then our teams contact you prior to your flight to ask you if you are willing to take that dinner in the lounge. The last pillar is international waste. A lot of feedback we receive from our clients is, oh yeah, you have a lot of waste, plastic, etc. We're doing as much as we can. Recycling is already done for flight from Canada to Paris and Amsterdam, but we have some regulation here in Canada on international waste that put some constraint. So we are working with a caterer to really kind of test and see what we can do and challenge as well the regulation to make sure we're going to be able to recycle can, Tetra Pak and plastic bottles going forward. So that's few example. I have also, maybe we can just go to the following slide, or you can go directly to the slide number 19. But the two main products offered to our client, both B2B and B2C, or offsets, how we can offset things through reforestation program. We make sure we're aligned with the SDGs, not necessarily impact only on the climate, but also on communities. The other product is the sustainable aviation fuel. There is a corporate program available, and we have discussed with Encore that we may have a dedicated session to present you the products and the program. Also from 1st of January in Europe, flight departing from France and the Netherlands will have up to 1% SAF on flights, and there is a small contribution that impact the tickets sold in Europe. That is not the case for North America. That is just tickets sold in Europe. And then for B2C, you also have the possibility to offset through another type of program, but also to buy SAF. That's a new program that just got released early 2022, and offer really 4 options for you to really compensate through various options. And if you see on the following slide, why there is 2 options. People are asking me, but if I offset, why should I buy some SAF? And you will see on the following slide, the main reason is because, yes, you can plant tree to reduce your carbon footprint, but a tree needs to grow before being able to capture CO2 in the atmosphere. So we tend to say, and you will see on the following slide, that the CO2 compensation offer is a long-term, a long-run solution, up to 10 years, while when you invest in SAF, you basically reduce the carbon emission even before emitting them, because you have a reduction even before boarding the aircraft. So these are like few products and initiatives that we've been doing towards sustainability, and I'm sure we'll be able to organize a session to really go in depth on the products if you're interested, and what does it mean for you, for corporate customer, but also for individual customer, just for your own interests, for your family and friends. More than happy to share with you.
Thank you, Marion. I think we'll take you up on that. I think it's something that maybe our clients might want to look further into the topic and sort of look at the impacts that you can offer and sort of these conversation offers that you're speaking of. And I think one of the interesting points you made was on the idea of just these small plastics and how your clients have been asking you, hey, what about these small plastics? And I think, as I will talk later on this, it really connects to the idea of the supply chain and sort of the power that you have as a consumer to control the efficiency or the sustainability of the supply chain which you use. So sort of this impact goes beyond the 1 to 2% that the travel industry might be in charge of in terms of CO2 emissions, and it goes way beyond that and can impact other industries as well. So just short of time here, I just maybe would like to ask you, could you maybe give us a vision of, for a world with sustainability travel, what that looks like for you and sort of what you see in the coming years ahead?
Well, I always say that I have a dream. I talk about waste, for example. We worked a lot here in Montreal, in Yule, to make sure, we can recycle and collect waste much more and make sure we can reuse them whenever possible. I have a dream because SAF, and we can explain that in another session. What is it, SAF? How is it made from, etc. The feedstock used to create some SAF. And one of the innovation will be to use municipal waste to create biofuel. And my dream will be that one day we will collect all waste from our aircraft and we will directly use that waste to create our biofuel to fly. And that will be kind of a virtual circle where, everything is reused and participate to the reduction of our carbon footprint. So hopefully, in the short term, probably it will take probably longer than my expectation, but hopefully we'll be able to have some solution in addition to aircraft, but we're an airline, so we're not responsible of building aircraft, but we'll have solutions to really help shape responsible travel to another level. We have already solution, but I think we need to accelerate, and we need to explain also to the public, to the customer, what are the challenges that we face, but the solutions are there. We have solutions, we just need to accelerate and scale the industry towards the right direction.
Thank you. And I think it's interesting you say that, because again, you're saying with the pandemic, there has been a lot of, I would say, acceleration, a lot of increased interest that have come up, right? People have refocused and seen the kind of impact that the world can have, right? How global we are, how connected we are. And I think that connection has really allowed, I think, a lot of technologies to pop up, but also to really think of maybe some of these technologies, you know, talking about the sustainable aviation fuel, taking sort of a precedence that was not there before this pandemic. So maybe not to say there's a positive out of this pandemic, but the reshifting of just looking at new avenues and a way for a sustainable future have definitely taken a forefront in the conversation that was not there before this. So just in the interest of time, is there, Elsa, I don't know if there's any questions by an audience member?
Hi, Fred. No, I was monitoring that, but no questions so far. Just made an announcement. We have the pleasure to have Marion for the next 4 minutes. So if there is anything you want to ask her, now is the time. But as she mentions, like the SAF, it's really the word for today to have a real impact now with the means that are available today, not wait for anything that might be developed now that it is really a central subject. So this sustainable aviation fuel is really the go-to that we need to look at more closely. So we'll have the pleasure to organize a session that would be more targeting this component, and economically and financially, what does that mean as well? How can the corporations, our clients, our customers understand what is this supply chain and understand that more holistic view that we have been talking about since the beginning of the event, and make sure that they make the best choice, not just focusing on having plastic cutlery when taking a meal on board.
Yeah, although they're very important initiative, but yeah, the bigger picture for the industry.
Exactly. Well, so still no question that I can see. So thank you so much, Marion, for stopping and being with us for this beautiful event. Thank you so much for the contribution you're making for this more sustainable world that we travel into and we have the pleasure to discover every day.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and look forward to having a more in-depth discussion on the solution for our industry. I'm sure people will be quite curious about what is at stake, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Thank you.
So I guess we can continue with you, Fred, and the further content for the presentation of today.
Right. So I'll go just further into you know, some of the initiatives. I think Marion covered a large part, so if there's a slight overlap, I'll really try to go through that as quickly as I can, and as well really give you an insight on, you know, what is happening and what a corporate travel manager or a company could really be doing to limit their carbon footprint in the world. So you know, first on really what goes under environmental sustainability. So, you know, we think of an environmentally conscious company as one that has a well-defined environmental strategy to achieve net zero emissions and zero waste. So for both us, you know, let's say as a TMC or for travel companies or just companies in general and other industries, carbon reduction and offsetting programs, a circular economy, waste management, water and energy saving, as well as renewable energy programs are really what defines initiative on this forefront. And so to achieve some of these goals that we've seen, there's been a net zero roadmap for travel in collaboration with the UN Environmental Program, which set out 5 steps, right, which include setting the right baselines and emissions targets to achieve individual and sector goals, monitoring results and reporting progress, collaborating within and across industries. This is the supply chains we were talking about earlier, providing finance and investments required to the transition. So this goes into the technology capability, and as well as just overall raising awareness and building capacities on climate. So the more informed we are, the more educated we are, the better decisions we can make as individuals as well as companies. And so it really becomes important as I will delve into further examples along the way. So what we've seen is that, as Marion really has stated, is that you know, airlines account for about 2% of global greenhouse emissions. And so being on the increasing scrutiny of the environmental impact, airlines are setting their own timetables to reduce their carbon footprint. So in 2016, ICAO adopted the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, in which airlines agreed to maintain carbon neutral growth in international flights. And so this accounts for a vast majority of the airline carbon emissions overall, which would go beyond 2022. So the airline industry, as Marion also mentioned, has really been working towards a goal of having their net emissions from 2005 levels by 2050. But then again, you really want to make these progresses way ahead and really be ahead of the curve, and not just to say that, hey, by 2045, you're rushing to get all these goals sort of completed. Now, aircraft investments will be a critical component as well to this. So what does that mean? We'll need carriers investing in fleet renewal plans, looking to retire old aircrafts in favor of newer ones that are more fuel efficient aircrafts, and as well as just any of these things that can report significant emission reduction. So I'll give an example of American Airlines, which is, I think, invested about $23 billion for 550 new aircrafts since 2013 as part of an extensive fleet renewal program. And so each new generation of aircraft comes with a targeted fuel efficiency improvement of around 10% to 15%. And if there is, again, as I had mentioned earlier, if there's any silver lining to this pandemic for the airline industry, is that it has enabled carriers to really accelerate those renewal programs for fleets to retire older aircraft types more quickly as they slash capacity. And as well as, for example, Delta retired about 200 older aircraft, which improved fuel efficiency per seat mile by about 6%, right? So that's just one of the ways. As well, something that's popped up that, again, Marion had mentioned, that I just want to go briefly into, is the idea of these electric aircrafts, right? Now, electric aircraft could handle a lot of regional routes in the not too distant future. And so, you know, we've had airlines such as United announce a partnership with a company called Archer Aviation, which develops and eventually will be the goal to use electric powered aircrafts for moderate domestic markets. So with the current technology, such aircraft can only travel, let's say, up to 60 miles, but we're looking to really come up with a more efficient way so that, let's say, within a period of 5 years, we're able to create a lot more volume with these aircrafts for all domestic markets, right? So even going just a bit further, Airbus had revealed a concept for zero-emission commercial aircraft as well, which relies on hydrogen rather than jet fuel as their primary power source. Now, all this really wraps up into the idea of new technologies and some of these innovations that are coming up in the industry. And there's something that goes a little bit beyond the idea of just offsetting carbon emissions. And part of that is new innovations that have to do with carbon capture technology. Now, what these technologies do is essentially directly remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And a way to do that is that you invest in industrial-sized plants, which, by the way, United Airlines has sort of made that investment, which could get up to which could trap up to 1 million tons of carbon dioxide. Now, this is equivalent to 40 million trees, right? That would take to sort of replicate the sort of impact this makes. And as well as what this would do is permanently store that carbon dioxide underground. So this moves beyond, again, what I said, the carbon offset to 100% green, as opposed to just the idea of a net zero with carbon emissions by 2020. Now, Last but not least, I think we've really hammered on this point a bit now on the idea of sustainable fuel, right? That's the potential to cut emissions by up to 80%. This will be an important milestone of the airlines industry's path to zero emissions. As it is right now, again, we have it's sort of expensive, right? And it's scarce for widespread use at the moment, but it's something that can really be efficient for use and reduce these carbon emissions, right? So you have companies, for those who are on the call today, such as McDonald's, that have made agreements, right, to recycle cooking oil from McDonald's that they use to cook fries into renewable diesel, right? But these are all just things that you can sort of transfer from cooking oil to jet fuel. So it's an amazing innovations that are happening in the industry, and it's something that we should really be looking forward to in the next 20 years to really be an impact, and for the airline industry to really drive this innovation. So I'll quickly just move on to a little bit of hotels. So on the hotel front, really, there's a lack of standardization in the hotel industry. We saw that, essentially, we don't have the same standards that the airline industry has on some of their goals regarding sustainability. So to sort of compensate for some of this lack of standard, there's been initiatives such as the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiatives, which is a free tool for hotels to calculate the carbon footprint per occupied room on a daily basis, and on the area of meeting spaces on an hourly basis. So this is something that was brought up again in 2012, so a while back, and it's something that has been sort of pushed in the past couple of years as there's a high demand for what exactly from clients on sort of the impact that they have when they stay at some of these hotels and sort of the initiatives that these hotels are taking on. There's also been other things such as the World Travel and Tourism Council really collaborating with other hospitality companies to really calculate the water usage in the hotels and to sort of have this information readily available for the average consumer, the average guest. So one of the things that we've seen is that research has shown that Hilton and, for example, IHG has reported an increase in requests, as I was saying, from corporations for sustainability information. And the kind of information this has been largely requested depending on whether the client is far on their sustainability path or whether they're just on their infancy of trying to figure out what is the best way to allow our employees to travel in the most green way possible. So part of the biggest hotel hotel designs has been on smart design, right? So what does that mean? It's been on reducing waste, investments in local communities to shorten some of these supply chains and reduce impact. So I'll give you an example. Part of this hotels encouraging, so some hotels have been encouraging their guests to experience investments outside the hotel. So if a hotel is providing micro loans to a nearby restaurant, then that hotel would encourage their guests, let's say through their concierge service, to go and experience the farmers market, let's say nearby, and dine in the neighborhood at that restaurant. And these are the kind of initiatives that are important because not only are you creating sustainable methods for the way you interact with you operate your business, but this sort of experience goes really beyond the walls of the hotel, and it also works in favor of the hotel through brand loyalty. Now, we also have to sort of contextualize a lot of these things so that consumers of these services really understand. So, for example, you need to say that for a particular journey, for example, you need to say that it's the same as heating your house for a few weeks or months. So these kind of contextualization also helps the average consumer figure out the kind of impact they can make through their green practices. Now, I just noted here some of the things that I thought were interesting for that hotels have done, and again, this is on the larger scales, but you see Fairmont hotels are LEED certified, which means that they have committed to creating green buildings that are green and have sustainability methods within them. You've seen that Hilton hotels have dramatically decreased their waste production and water waste in the past several years, and as well as Marriott's themselves have grown the restaurant's produce on site, and all these really are things that are important when considering which hotels to book for corporate travel, right? And so a lot of the people on the call today will want to take some of these considerations if you want to sort of follow that sustainability path. So I'll go a bit just briefly into overall statistics. Most of this coming from GBTN is that companies domestically and internationally are incorporating sustainability into their business travel programs, regardless of their size. And we see here that by a recent survey, companies show that 37% track the carbon footprint of travelers. This is something that could be largely improved. Even at Encore, we offer carbon emission reports for our air travel so that our clients can sort of understand the sort of impact their employees can make and create a more adhesive way, a more efficient way to travel. We see that 23% use a sustainability index or scorecard system to understand the sustainability practices of their key suppliers, and as well as 7% have set carbon emission reduction targets. So there is a lot of improvement to be made, and again, we see that the industry is making that effort, and so it will be really important that in order to push that, as we're saying with airlines having the power to influence the supply chain and the suppliers, the same way that travelers have the power to influence the sort of travel they want to make, and they can influence some of these travel companies based on their own decisions. So how does this necessarily play into corporate responsibility? Simply put, companies no longer travel the luxury of maintaining business as usual, right? They need to deliver on the promise of sustainability, and that goes for travel. So fortunately, there are a number of benefits that these companies stand to gain in doing so. More and more consumers are making purchasing and loyalty decisions based on the brands and experiences that align with their sustainability values. So I'll say that there was a recent research from Accenture, and it said that some 66% of consumers said that they are ramping up their sustainable or ethical purchasing, and 74% reported choosing where to shop based on values and ethical corporate practices. And it's not just company leaders that are considering such business practices, right? Employees are increasingly leaning on their companies to act more responsibly and act on their behalf. And so, with this same survey, it was found that 65% believe that organizations should be responsible for leaving their people net better off through their work. And so again, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of responsibility that also really needs to be shifted to the companies. Now, there's, I talk of all these things, but the truth is sometimes the data problem, right? Almost none of the travel companies, that sort of we looked at through the research can say how much plastic they use necessarily, in a large part because no one requires them to do so. Hotels keep numbers, let's say, for water and energy use through utility companies, and airlines and even cruise lines can keep track of fuel, but no one really makes them tally every last pound of plastic, right? Which becomes important in which partnerships you sort of decide to undertake. Some hotels count for voluntarily at specific properties, which is better than nothing, but these numbers are really self-reported, and there's really no way to double check those numbers, or really you need to take them at a grain of and a huge grain of salt. But companies, what they're doing is they avoid digging into the hardest part, which is pressuring the producers or the suppliers or tenants, also just generally other stakeholders, to stop creating and shipping products like food and cleaning supplies with plastic. What it is, though, fortunately, on the other side is that there is a growing awareness that these airlines need to foster this sort of aggregated ecosystems to be able to align all their interests. So I will say that what happens when this happens is that it can create a ripple effect that, for example, large hotels taking these initiatives will force smaller hotels to also pursue these same goals. So these goals for all companies, right, which is the sort of positive impact that can be made and is often duplicated by competitors. So underlying all of this is putting the right technologies in place and smart data to use. So this could mean applying carbon intelligence to help companies understand, report on, and actively manage their carbon footprint. It could mean migrating business operations towards green cloud operations, using sustainable procurement hubs that identify suppliers with ethical practices, or as well implementing carbon calculators that can help travelers make informed choices and assist, corporate travel planners in sticking to these carbon targets, these carbon emission targets. So when you look at companies and ideas to sort of implement in companies, sustainability is a commitment, to be sure, but it's not as time or cost prohibitive, I should say, as it used to be. Every organization, large and small, can introduce behavioral measures that make climate actions a part of their culture. For instance, you can give your employees individual or team carbon budgets. You can allow the, you can point them to carbon neutral transportation options once they've used up, for example, their allowance. You might want to set a rule that no one jumps on the plane for a single meeting, which that kind of initiative costs $0 to implement, and will likely end up having a lot of saving a lot of travel and time and money. Initiatives include looking for more direct flights as opposed to flights that might have a layover somewhere else. You could, if you do have room on your budget, you could consider shifting a portion of your travel spend to green businesses and incentivize employees to patronize more sustainable vendors. We've seen that based on research, there is a willingness, at least by 5%, for businesses to incur a cost of 5% above what they would pay if it has sustainable outcomes. So companies really also have so that's part of the ways that as a company you can implement some of these measures for your teams. Companies also have a big opportunity to incentivize travelers to avoid plastic by offering discounts or other rewards, for using their own reusable containers. And so all these things can really come up together, and it can often result in even stronger customer loyalty depending on the kind of practices, especially with millennials and Gen Z who are really strong on, the idea of sustainability and looking for employers who take a very aggressive stance, which we see at this point, with how they impact the world. Now, also, I think I'll stop here just for a second to see if there is any questions, and then I'll move on to sort of some of the questions to ask if, when you're creating a sustainable corporate program.
Thank you, Fred. There is indeed one question, and before I address it to you, just a little clarity on that, because I forgot to mention where to ask your questions. So maybe some of you have some and cannot ask them. So you have to direct your mouse to the top right corner of your screen to the little bubbles with the check with the question mark to access the Q&A. You post a question here. I can review them and post them and ask them to Fred for us to answer. So the question that we have from the audience is, do you know what sort of percentage increase airlines will make on ticket prices to cover the cost of these developments?
Right. So some of these developments really are set within what we've seen is some of the research is that, in fact, these airlines and companies that have sustainability practices tend to have higher profitability margin than those who do not, right? So for when you talk about EBIT margin, which is sort of your operational revenue, it's that on average, those who implement these certain practices, right, which create better operational efficiencies, therefore reducing cost of operation, tend to have higher margins. So it's not a matter of, from what we've gathered, it's not a matter of increasing cost and sort of shifting some of those sustainability costs to the consumer, but we see that it's really more advantageous for these airlines to do so, right? And therefore, it should not, in the natural progression of ticket prices, that should not be a factor that airlines take into account in terms of increasing their airline prices and the ticket of the prices of their tickets.
Thank you. There is no other question that came in. Just a little mention that we received a little bit late, unfortunately, a question for Marion that will be answered on the post-event communication that were to do with the subject of these empty planes flying around to keep their airport slots. And in terms of sustainability action, what are the airlines going to do to prevent the bad impact and bad press this can have? So this is a question that will be answered on the communication after the event. I'll let you conclude, Fred.
Yeah, and just to speak briefly on that, when we talk about sustainability, this I might have concentrated on the environmental, but we really talk about the social and governmental aspect too. So, when we talk about airlines flying empty planes in order not to lose their slots, it's a regulatory issue that everyone needs to get on board with to make sure that these sort of instances do not happen where you're, unnecessarily creating more carbon emissions just to retain the slots, your travel slots, right? Especially in a time period where no one's traveling and airlines are scrambling to make sure that they keep their market share. I'm sure that's something we'll answer to the person who asked these questions further, and that Marion maybe could elaborate more on sort of her instances on what Air France-KLM is doing. But yeah, so I'll just carry on quickly. Just one last consideration here, sort of the conversation on what the questions that need to be asked when you're creating your corporate travel program. So these are just some of the things we should look at and should be asking yourself when creating a sustainable corporate travel program. You should look at whether sustainability is an integral part of the travel policy, the priority it has in reducing the carbon footprint, what extent the organization has to account for these environmental sustainability of its third-party suppliers. Again, this is what I had alluded to earlier in terms of the supply chains and the impact that you can have in influencing those you work with to have more sustainable practices. You could look at, assessing your current program on what your current travel budget is and how you can adopt that to a more sustainable approach. And so these are just generally questions you should be asking yourself, and it's something that even at Encore here we can help you with in terms of determining how you can set up part of that program. A lot of our programs, for example, here we have clients who want to only have hotels that have a sustainable approach or are certified by some green agency, and so that's something that will help in sort of looking into as well. And so these are really questions that we hope that you take away from today as something you can evaluate when thinking of sustainable approach when it comes to business travel and even individual travel. And it's something that we hope that you're able to implement within your own company sooner rather than later. And I don't know if there's any more questions, but this is all I had for today. Thank you all for attending. Also, is there any more questions that have come up?
No, there is none, but if there are any, we will share the contact information of Fred and myself, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. As long as it's before we send that post-event communication, we'll include all of the questions and the answers appropriately. Thank you very much, Fred, for your hard
Thank
work
you
at
also.
collecting all of this information and providing that very very interesting and insightful content. Speak soon and see you soon, everyone.